Welcome! Today we will tell you about one of the greatest threats to the Imperium, the Tyranid Hive fleets, monsters that devour entire planets. Hive fleet. We must scour them from the stars before they do the same to us. Chaplain Ortan Cassius, Reclusiarch of the Ultramarines chapter. A hive fleet is a large armada of living biomechanical starships created by the Tyranids for the purpose of gathering the raw materials and biomass necessary for the reproduction, evolution, and expansion of their species. A hive fleet is used to attack and strip star systems of their biomass using the full range of Tyranid bioforms. Only 3 primary Tyranid hive fleets and a host of smaller splinter fleets have ever come into direct contact with the Imperium of Man, but they've all brought devastating damage and loss of life. The Imperium's Segmentum Ultima Command designated them as Hive Fleet Behemoth, Hive Fleet Kraken, and Hive Fleet Leviathan, and they each made first contact with Imperial space in the eastern fringes of the galaxy in the Segmentum Ultima. Hive Fleet Behemoth arrived in the Milky Way galaxy in the year 745 of the 41st millennium, Hive Fleet Kraken in the year 993 of the 41st millennium, and Hive Fleet Leviathan in the year 997 of the 41st millennium. Each hive fleet is ultimately governed by the collective psychic hive mind of the Tyranid species, though at the heart of any hive fleet are the Norn queens who interpret the will of the hive mind for other Tyranid organisms and who personally birth almost every Tyranid bioform present in the fleet, save for its hive ships. The potent psychic power of every hive fleet's connection to the hive mind produces an effect known as the shadow in the warp, that prevents travel or communication through the immaterium in the astrographic vicinity of the hive fleet. History. Origins. The Tyranids are unlike any other intelligent species to be encountered by humanity since mankind first reached the stars during the Age of Terror. They are the ultimate predators, and all living things from the lowliest insect to the most advanced civilization are nothing but their prey. Only now are the inhabitants of the galaxy realizing the true scale of the threat. Unless the Tyranids can be stopped, it will mean nothing less than the extinction of all life in the Milky Way. The Tyranids are likened to a galactic swarm of locusts, consuming everything in its path, feeding on entire worlds and leaving only dead husks in their wake. Their threat is such that an unprotected planet can be infested and stripped clean of all its organic material in a matter of solar weeks, without even slowing down the greater advance of the hive fleet. The Tyranids are a spaceborne species that have inveigled their way into the realms of humanity, as well as those of other xenos, like a disease spreading through a healthy body. The Tyranids travel in great fleets of gigantic living creatures that serve as spacecraft, each of which is home to countless lesser Tyranid organisms grown in the bubbling organ sacs of the vessel's reproductive chambers. All of these creatures are born to serve the single entity that is the ship, and the ship itself exists only as part of the entity that is the hive fleet. When a hive fleet encounters a prey world, it does not invade for territorial gain or out of a sense of pride or vengeance. Indeed, it is doubtful the Tyranids even comprehend such alien concepts. Rather, they invade to harvest valuable biomass and feed their insatiable hunger. The Tyranids require an endless supply of food, not only to nourish the hive fleets, but to grow new Tyranid organisms. Therefore, when a hive fleet invades a planet rich in life, every action of every Tyranid creature is honed to a single goal: the total and rapid absorption of that world's population, ecosystems, and bioresources. To this end, the hive fleet creates an army with the express purpose of overcoming the prey world's defenders before the planet is stripped of every scrap of biomatter and devoured. The hive mind, the magi biologists of the Imperium, categorize each Tyranid hive fleet as a separate force, an individual entity that competes with other hive fleets for resources. Indeed, each is self-sufficient, appearing to exhibit different strategies and developing unique bioforms to overcome its prey. However, the truth is more complex, for each hive fleet is but a splinter of one greater assemblage. The Tyranids' numbers are vast beyond counting, swarms so large that they block out the very stars, Yet each and every creature is but a single cell in the living body of a single super-organism. Every thought and action, every spark of life in the Tyranid species is bound and interlinked into a single, unfathomable consciousness, a great entity that stretches across hundreds of light-years of space. This Gestalt intelligence is known as the Hive mind. The Hive mind holds all Tyranids in a powerful psychic bond that enables them to act together in perfect unison. Under the influence of this ancient, disembodied consciousness, the Tyranids have fed on countless planets and devoured civilizations since time immemorial across many galaxies. Shadow in the warp. The coming of a Tyranid hive fleet is preceded by a smothering psychic signal that envelops entire star systems and disrupts all forms of warp travel and communication. Swallowed up by psychic static, whole worlds suddenly go deathly silent, giving no clues as to what is unfolding on the surface below, or of what terrors are about to befall them. This is the shadow in the warp, and it heralds imminent invasion and horror. It is unknown if the shadow in the warp is created deliberately by the hive fleets, or if it is simply a byproduct of the hive mind's innate synaptic control over its myriad bioforms. In any case, the shadow in the warp creates fear and panic wherever it falls, instilling a pervasive dread into the minds of a prey world's defenders, plunging entire planets into misery and despair. For highly psychic species such as the craftworld Eldari, or for luckless psychers caught within this enervating effect, the malaise is magnified tenfold. Should a psyker attempt to use their otherworldly abilities, the cerebral cacophony worsens even further. The psychic sound of a billion alien thoughts scratch at their mind, and unless they are particularly strong-willed, they will be pitched into an insanity where they will repeatedly utter phrases in a tongue too alien to properly pronounce. For intelligent species such as the humans of the Imperium of Man, whose means of interstellar communication and travel rely upon highly specialized psychers such as astropaths and navigators, the shadow in the warp is one of the deadliest facets of the Tyranid menace. Bereft of their means to call for reinforcements or safely navigate the surrounding space, the worlds of the Imperium are easily isolated from the wider galaxy. This means that by the time the shadow in the warp falls, it is already too late. These beleaguered planets are effectively on their own. They must fend for themselves and face the Tyranid swarm with the weapons they have at hand, or die in the attempt. First contact. We cannot live through this. Mankind cannot live through this. In a single day they have covered this planet with a flood of living blades and needle-fanged mouths. Kill one and 10 take its place. If they are truly without number, then our race is doomed to a violent death before every shred of our civilization is scoured away by a force more voracious than the fires of hell themselves. Death. By the machine god, death is here. Magos Varnak. Last words. Mankind's first recorded contact with the Tyranids happened in early part of the year 745 of the 41st millennium, on the eastern outskirts of the Imperium. Up to this point, humanity was wholly unaware of the new threat on its borders, and if any of the galaxy's older empires knew of the oncoming swarm, they did not see fit to warn the upstart Imperium. For solar decades since their arrival on the galactic rim, the Hive fleets had consumed worlds with no intelligent life, replenishing the reserves of biomatter expended during their long, slow crawl through the intergalactic void. Now reinvigorated, the insectoid aliens descended upon the far-flung imperial ocean world of Tyran Primus, an invasion for which the Imperium would thereafter name their species Tyranids. During the subsequent invasion, the Imperial forces were decimated, the planet's defences swiftly overcome by the vast invading Tyranid horde. Unable to transmit a message by means of astro-telepathy, the alien's shadow in the warp, having cut off all psychic communication, Magos Varnak, the commander of the Adeptus Mechanicus Explorator base on the world, compiled a data codex containing Tyran's records. With only solar seconds left before his death, Varnak hid the codex in a bore shaft in the depths of the Mechanicus outpost, some 3,000 meters below the planet's surface, hoping that it would be recovered later by the Imperium. The courageous tech priest then activated the sacred self-destruct Rune of Ending, annihilating the entire outpost in a cataclysmic plasma reactor explosion. Tyran Primus was lost. The First Tyrannic War had begun. Grim discovery. An alien threat has risen from beyond the abyss, a swarm so vast that it blots out the stars. This horror fights neither for power nor territory, but rather to feed a hunger so insatiable that it will eventually devour the entire galaxy. Inquisitor Kryptman's dire warning to Ultramarines Chapter Master, Marnius Calga. Having scoured Tyran Primus of biomass, the alien Hive fleet moved on in search of other worlds to feed upon, pushing its tendrils ever deeper into the galaxy, whilst the death screams of an entire world went unheard. Were it not for a single man, Inquisitor Fidus Kryptman of the Ordo Xenos, the fate of Tyran might have gone entirely unnoticed. After all, the galaxy is a big place, mysteries are commonplace, and the Imperium is as slow to react as only a monolithic bureaucracy can be. Whilst in time, many other Inquisitors, including such distinguished names as Bronislaw Chivak, Agmar and Solomon Locke, would come to realize the true threat of the Hive mind. Were it not for Fidus Kryptman, its very existence would not have been known before it was already too late. Indeed, whether through a quirk of fate or out of some investigative instinct, Kryptman's decision to personally investigate Tyran Primus's mysterious silence proved vital to the Imperium's survival. By the time Kryptman reached Tyran, a standard year had passed since the attack. At first, the Inquisitor could not equate the husk of a planet he found to ocean-bound Tyran Primus. The world had been sucked dry, every scrap of vegetation and every drop of water was gone. A crater was all that remained of the Adeptus Mechanicus outpost, and all that could be found of the planet's Navis Imperialis cruiser fleet were acid-eaten hulks, icy shells devoid of life and adrift in space. After a long search, Inquisitor Kryptman recovered Magos Varnak's data codex, the knowledge contained within it bought with the life of an entire planet. What Kryptman saw when he reviewed the fragmented data was a dire prophecy of doom. Static-laced images of scythe-limbed aliens, footage of the skies over Tyran Primus turning black with swarming monsters, and orbital pict views of a fleet of living void ships so vast that the stellar horizon was veiled in inky blackness. Kryptman felt hollow as he realized what he had discovered. Not wasting another moment, the Inquisitor set forth to warn the galaxy of the oncoming horror from beyond the stars. A horror he named Tyranids, after the doomed world they had consumed. Emerging threats. To defeat the Tyranids, we must study them. There's more than a few million lives at stake here. More than 50 worlds. The whole of the Imperium of man could be wiped out by these beasts. They must be stopped at any cost. Any cost. Inquisitor Auriel, addressing Lieutenant Cage of the 13th Penal Legion. Unfortunately for the Imperium and the other intelligent species of the galaxy, it is not only Hive Fleet Leviathan that is assailing the Milky Way. New Hive fleets are even now beginning to emerge from their cold sleep through the intergalactic void. Hive Fleet Medusa, mistakenly thought by the Imperium to be another tendril of the Leviathan, was last recorded feasting upon the ice world of Shadrach. Hive Fleet Moloch's inexorable advance from the galactic north is also gathering momentum as it devoured the Kiltor sector and now the Tyrellian civilization. Perhaps most worrying of all are Hive Fleets Scylla and Charybdis, carving parallel paths up through the Segmentum Pacificus and Segmentum Solar, the closest known Tyranid threat to Terra itself. Though the Imperium might have a little time left to prepare its defences against these twin threats, the Asurianis Heimhan craftworld is caught in the jaws of these two Hive fleets, and cannot easily navigate a path to avoid one without risking falling into the clutches of the other. None know for sure how many other Hive fleets still lie dormant within the void beyond the rim of the Milky Way, slowly approaching our galaxy to wake and feed. Nor are the threats of previous Tyranid invasions truly over. The splintered fleets of Hive Fleet Kraken are regaining their strength as they feast on a bounty of worlds ill-prepared to defend themselves whilst the galaxy looks to supposedly greater threats. Long, dormant remnants of Hive Fleet Jormungandr stir to life, bringing several Imperial worlds to the brink of destruction. Rumours even abound that remnants of Hive fleet behemoth, thought slain over 2 standard centuries ago, continue to ravage populations and settlements within the Ultima segmentum, with scattered reports of Tyranid attacks on worlds from Kulth to Macragge and beyond. With so many threats emerging from unseen quarters, many Imperial worlds are holding back from reinforcing the ongoing fight against Hive fleet Leviathan in the Fourth Tyrannic War, choosing to preserve their forces for wars against the Great Devourer closer to home. A glimmer of hope. Tyranids are creatures from our darkest nightmares, but remember this, they can bleed and they can die. Inquisitor Fidus Cryptman prior to his excommunication. However, as the ongoing Octarian War is proving, the Tyranids are encountering ever greater levels of resistance from their prey. Whilst the Imperium reinforces whole star systems, raising thousands of Astra Militarum regiments and dozens of Space Marine chapters solely to combat the Tyranid threat, several Asuryani craft worlds have begun to burn entire worlds to cinder, employing ancient and highly advanced weapons of destruction not used in Terran millennia. The Tau Empire, having learned well at the claws of Hive Fleet Gorgon, are developing new technologies and weaponry to fight the Tyranids and field-testing experimental prototypes to defend their realm in the Eastern Fringe. Even the Necrons and the forces of chaos are turning their attentions towards a foe that is slowly devouring a galaxy that both believe is theirs alone to rule over or despoil as they see fit. So far, these efforts are, at best, succeeding in slowing Hive Fleet Leviathan's rapacious advance, but it is only a matter of time before the Hive mind adapts. With every lost battle, the Hive fleets create new breeds of warrior organisms and bioconstructs to counter and defeat their foes. Yet with every victory, another world dies, devoured to feed the insatiable hunger of the Hive mind. Primary Hive fleets. Hive Fleet Behemoth. Hive Fleet Behemoth was the first major Tyranid Hive fleet encountered and defeated by the Imperium of Man. The ensuing conflict became known as the First Tyrannic War. This Hive fleet was eventually destroyed in the year 745 of the 41st millennium by the combined might of the Ultramarines, the White Scars, and the battle fleets of the Navis Imperialis. Hive Fleet Kraken. Hive Fleet Kraken was the second major Tyranid Hive fleet to invade the galaxy. It was responsible for the outbreak of the Second Tyrannic War, which began officially in 992 of the 41st millennium and ended only after the Ultramarines chapter of Space Marines successfully broke the back of the Tyranid invasion in Imperial space at the Battle of Ikar IV, and the Asuryani of Craftworld Iandan successfully defended their home at great cost against the Tyranid horde. Hive Fleet Leviathan. Hive Fleet Leviathan was the third and largest Tyranid incursion into the Milky Way galaxy in the year 997 of the 41st millennium and marked the start of the Third Tyrannic War for the survival of the Imperium. Less than 5 standard years after the defeat of Hive Fleet Kraken in the Second Tyrannic War, Inquisitor Lord Fidus Cryptman noted the telltale signs of yet another Tyranid invasion in the year 997 of the 41st millennium. He implemented the Cryptman census, burning out dozens of astropaths in the attempt to contact scores of worlds on every fringe of the Imperium. Slowly, the responses, and lack of them, formed a pattern, and the venerable Inquisitor was able to chart the course of the Tyranids' latest Hive fleet to arrive in the galaxy. Codenamed Leviathan, this time the Tyranids approached from below the galactic plane, attacking from 2 points spaced wide apart in the shape of a closing pair of jaws, cutting off large portions of the galaxy from warp travel or astropathic communication. At a great cost in human life, a combined force of Planetary Defense Force troops, 2 regiments of the Astra Militarum, the Ultramarines and Mortifactors chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, and a Deathwatch kill team under the command of Inquisitor Cryptman crushed the left half of the Leviathan on the world of Tarsis Ultra, destroying the Tyranids nearest to Terra and re-establishing astropathic contact with the Imperial worlds between Leviathan's jaws. The Imperium had won its first victory in a war that had only begun. Later, during the era Indomitus, the Blood Angels and their successors among the Sanguinary Brotherhood defeated a massive tendril of the Leviathan with the aid of the Demons of Khorne's blood legions, commanded by the bloodthirster Kabanda and the Indomitus crusade of Rabut Gilliman at the Battle of Baal. Unfortunately, the Hive mind had only begun to intensify its final push against the Imperium. It was not long after the fighting on Baal that the largest mass of Hive fleet Leviathan yet encountered attacked the western reaches of the Segmentum Pacificus, seeking to strike at a relatively undefended region of the galaxy, while the defenders of the Imperium were otherwise engaged with the forces of chaos emanating out of the Great Rift. The Great Tyranid Assault, the start of the Fourth Tyrannic War, began with the coordinated attack from above and below the galactic plane by three new tendrils of the Leviathan dubbed Hive Fleet Nautilon, Hive Fleet Promothor, and Hive Fleet Grendillus, respectively, by the Imperium. The two tendrils were moving in parallel towards their ultimate goal of terror in the Segmentum Solar, and with the Imperium distracted by the ongoing demands of the Indomitus Crusade, few human forces initially were available to stand against it. Other Hive fleets. There are many other Hive fleets known to exist in the galaxy or to be approaching it from the vast void of intergalactic space. Several of these Hive fleets are splinter fleets of the original three to invade the galaxy and include the following. Hive Fleet Ouroboros. When Miriamulus the Elder, the then Cardinal of Thracian Primaris, recorded the history of the Legion of Ouroboros in the 36th millennium, this account detailed attacks in the Helican sector in an earlier age, thousands of standard years before. The Legion was described as consisting of winged monsters that descended from the heavens and stripped the countryside of all life, vomited from the bellies of great beasts which clouded the stars with their numbers. An analysis of the warlord-class Titan Mechanica Cranus, a cited veteran of the Ouroboros Wars, revealed distinctive bioplasma scarring and pyroacid burns, now known to be consistent with the damage caused by Tyranid biomechanical weapons. It is believed the Space Wolves Space Marine chapter also possesses trophies of Tyranid-like bioforms dating from this epoch, including the so-called Kraken's Egg. The Cardinal attributed the Emperor himself with leading a crusade that caused the beasts of Ouroboros to fall upon themselves, culminating in a mighty 12-day-long battle over a warp rift dangerously close to the Eye of Terror. However, augur dating techniques place the battle damage sustained by Mechanica Cranus as occurring post-heresy, making the Emperor's embodied presence extremely unlikely. It is theorized that Hive Fleet Ouroboros may have consisted of some Tyranids who were drawn ahead of the other fleets by treacherous warp currents and deposited at the Eye of Terror in the Milky Way. This theory could also explain the presence of Tyranid splinter fleets in segmentums other than the Segmentum Tempestus. Hive Fleet Tiamat, first encountered in the large double-binary system on the eastern fringe, known as the Tiamat system, it is theorized by Imperial xenographers that this Hive fleet was a Tyranid implant probe, possibly molecular-coded DNA, sent ahead, perhaps hidden within cosmic debris or solar winds, to seed the star system and spread of its own accord ahead of the arrival of much larger Hive fleets. This system was discovered by an Imperial explorator fleet hailing from Triplex Fall in the 35th millennium. The Tiamat system contained 7 life-sustaining worlds and a host of lesser planetoids. The explorator fleet discovered to their cost that every biosphere in the system was a death world of the most voracious kind. Xenologists eventually determined that the life all over the system shared a common genetic ancestry and had developed various ways to get from world to world to seed new territory. Realizing their own craft could be contaminated from entering the system, the explorators quarantined themselves in Tiamat rather than infect the wider Imperium. They were to survive and report for another 162 solar hours before succumbing to the lethal denizens of the fecund realm. The Tiamat system's worlds were systematically fusion-bombed on several occasions, but life was never extinguished there. It now lies within the area swept over by Hive Fleet Kraken. Tiamat's primary base of operations in the system is the jungle world of Xyophoria, which it has begun to tyrannoform into some type of biomechanical psychic resonator whose purpose remains unknown and worrisome to the Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition. The Hive fleet continues to guard its conquered territory with single-minded ferocity. Only the Deathwatch Space Marines of the nearby Watch Fortress Haltmote and Inquisitor Fidus Cryptman, who came out of his long exile to join them, had any inkling of the threat posed by the immense psychic resonator of Tiamat. The theories they discussed long into the night were so wild, and the other threats facing the Imperium in the era Indomitus so dire, that they were given little credence by the wider Inquisition. Hive Fleet Colossus. Several large nomadic fleets of curious, conch-like spacecraft, apparently grown from natural stone, were sighted through the segmentums Tempestus and Ultima, late in the 38th millennium, bearing many similarities to Hive fleets. The Centauroid bio-creatures aboard them, which may have been members of the species recorded in Imperial archives as Zotes, were known to communicate, albeit telepathically, with other races, unlike any other Tyranid organism before or since. The denizens of Colossus claimed to be captives escaping their oppressors, but their frequent contacts with other alien races and attempts to settle in Imperium space caused them to be declared Xenos Horribilis early in the 39th millennium. The genocidal 50-year-long Zoroastra-Attila Wars followed as the entire race hurled itself against humanity with terrifying ferocity, revealing their true murderous nature. The last known Colossus vessel was eventually destroyed in the year 226 of the 39th millennium above the world of Zoroastra. The impact of its shattered remains rendered the northern hemisphere of that world uninhabitable until late in the 41st millennium. Only now are Adeptus Mechanicus Explorator expeditions beginning to piece together the truth. Due to inconsistent records, Imperial scholars cannot agree as to whether Colossus was wiped out during this campaign or during the Helican Crusade. Indeed, it is known that in the year 897 of the 41st millennium, elements of what has now been identified as Hive Fleet Colossus invaded the imperial civilized world of Thraciax. Imperial forces on the planet were unable to stop the constant influx of invaders, and Imperial High Command issued a ruling for all forces to withdraw so that the Imperial Navy could conduct an exterminatus action from space, and in the process leave the settlers of Thraciax to their fate. However, the Space Wolves chapter's Wolf Lord Bran Redmore, resupplying his great company upon Thraciax at the time, objected fiercely to the command. He sent 2 full squads of Grey Hunters to reinforce the spaceport of Montberg and give the Imperial settlers a chance to evacuate. At the spaceport, the Grey Hunters set about training the settlers in anti-Tyranid tactics. When the forces of Colossus attacked, these ad hoc troops managed to hold the walls of the spaceport long enough for the settler families to escape off-planet safely. 6 Grey Hunters survived, and the Imperial High Command ordered them to be stripped of all Astartes' honours for disobeying a direct command, but Bran Redmore instead promoted all of them into his personal Wolf Guard. Hive Fleet Naga. Hive Fleet Naga was a relatively small hive fleet that invaded the galaxy from the eastern fringe somewhere to the galactic north of the Tau Empire in the year 801 of the 41st millennium, destroying countless Xenos domains and devouring several Asuriani worlds. The Eldari referred to this hive fleet as Tyranid, the endlessly winding serpent, and only through the combined efforts of Asuriani fleets from Idharai, Iyandan and Malantai craft worlds was Hive Fleet Naga destroyed in the year 812 of the 41st millennium. Unfortunately, the Tyranid hive mind absorbed several dozen samples of new biomass, including the DNA of the Eldari, gaining valuable experience of Eldari military strategies and capabilities. Hive Fleet Dagon, believed to be a splinter fleet of Hive Fleet Behemoth, was the first major Tyranid incursion into the Jericho Reach region of the Ultima Segmentum. The shadow in the warp cast by the Tyranid hive mind within this volatile region of space first heralded the arrival of this new and terrible hive fleet in the year 812 of the 41st millennium. Communication between parts of the Aculus Crusade and the reconquered regions of the Jericho Reach was lost without warning. Particularly affected was the Orpheus salient of the Achilles Crusade that was lost to communication and access with the rest of the Reach behind the Hive fleet's crawling shadow of warp interference. In the year 814 of the 41st millennium, the Deathwatch warship Thunder's Word entered the Freya system to investigate the silence of an astropathic relay. It found no trace of the relay, and indeed no trace of any life in the Freya system. Preparing to leave the star system, the Thunder's Word encountered two Tyranid drone ships. Its hull scored and pitted with acid and its magazines nearly exhausted, the Thunder's Word arrived at Watch Fortress Eriok, bringing news that the Tyranids had come to the Jericho Reach. Hive Fleet Gorgon. The Gorgon was a splinter fleet of Hive Fleet behemoth that invaded the space of the Tau Empire in the year 899 of the 41st millennium. It represented the Tau's first horrific encounter with the Tyranids. The Hive Fleet was destroyed in the year 903 of the 41st millennium through the combined efforts of the Tau Firecaste and the Imperial Guard. Regions of the Tau Empire that have been left barren by the rampaging Hive Fleet are known as the Zone of Silence. Hive Fleet Kronos. Where Hive Fleet Kronos travels, the shadow in the warp is at its most suffocatingly powerful. So strong is the psychic connection between Kronos and the Hive mind that a stifling aura of null power drifts ahead of its invasion swarms, agonizing psychically active foes and draining their spirit energy to bolster its own hosts. Even as this phenomena throws the enemy into fearful confusion, thousands upon thousands of warrior forms advance, unleashing a storm of organic missiles. Kronos avoids engaging its prey at close range when possible, for the prey it hunts revels in brutal close-quarters fighting, and thus a ranged kill is a more efficient method of extermination. Hive Fleet Scarabus. Hive Fleet Scarabus was annihilated by the troops of the 9th Cadian Shock Troopers Regiment at the walls of Fortress Carcassonne in the year 937 of the 41st millennium. The 9th Cadian did not lose even a single company of troops in this conflict. Hive Fleet Locust. In the year 945 of the 41st millennium, this Hive fleet largely wiped out the population of the imperial world of Ulmor before the arrival of the Ultramarines Space Marine chapter, in which the valiant sons of Gilliman managed to drive back the hordes of the Great Devourer during the subsequent Battle of Ulmor. Hive Fleet Lotan. Vectoriums of the Death Guard's 4th and 7th Plague Companies engaged the Tyranids of Hive Fleet Lotan amidst the steaming jungles of Hesp. When the swarms deploy toxicrenes and venomthropes to poison the environment, the Death Guard respond with plague spells, virus bombs, and demonic diseases. With neither side willing to back down, the atmosphere of Hesp becomes ever more toxic until the jungles and even the warring armies are reduced to a gory, bubbling soup. The first Tyranid Hive ship to taste this poisoned slurry recoils, its proboscis melting, and is bombarded into oblivion by the rest of its fleet. The jungle world of Hesp is left as an endless sea of toxic slime, too virulent for even the Hive fleets to devour. Hive Fleet Perseus. This Tyranid Hive fleet battled the Ultramarine Space Marine chapter in the year 976 of the 41st millennium, but in the year 982 of the 41st millennium, it subsequently drifted out of Imperial-held space and disappeared. Its current location and activities are unknown. Hive Fleet Megalodon. Originally one of the splinter fleets that formed following the defeat of Hive Fleet Kraken in the year 992 of the 41st millennium, Megalodon has since grown exponentially to be classified by the Imperium as a distinctive Hive fleet of its own, which continues to ravage Imperial space. Hive Fleet Jormungandr, a small Tyranid Hive fleet that entered the Imperium from the northeast of the Ultima Segmentum in the year 993 of the 41st millennium. Jormungandr quickly gathered large quantities of biomass by preying on unprotected worlds. Within 2 standard years of the first recorded attack, Jormungandr had effectively sealed off the entire Thalassa sector. The Hive fleet's vanguard was wiped out by Commander Chenkov, leading over 1 million Imperial Guardsmen of the Valhallan Ice Warriors' 18th Tundra Wolves Regiment. When a portion of the Crimson Castellans chapter was corrupted by chaos and turned renegade, becoming a piratical warband of Chaos Space Marines, the loyalist Castellans hunted down their corrupted brethren on the Hive world of Seafrax. But while they were engaged in battle, the Tyranid Hive fleet Jormungandr unexpectedly descended upon the world and forced both sides to lay down their animosity to defend themselves against the swarms of bloodthirsty Tyranids that threatened to destroy the world, and both groups of Astartes. However, the Hive fleet's sheer numbers soon overwhelmed all the combatants. The Crimson Castellans chapter. Master Sojai Antiro died in the bowels of the underhive of Hoventa Hive alongside his first company veterans, growling his defiance with his last breath even as Tyranid raveners encircled him and tore him to bloody shreds. The renegade Crimson Castellans leader, the pirate and self-styled Arch-Commodore Bloodspite, fled with the remainder of his forces to the lair he had established in an asteroid in orbit of Seafrax. But the asteroid and its defenders were ultimately swallowed by a Hive ship of truly enormous size. The Crimson Castellans chapter homeworld of Vol Secundus was abandoned shortly thereafter, and it is unknown whether any elements of the chapter, loyalist or renegade, have survived the fury of Jormungandr. Hive Fleet Medusa. This minor Hive fleet invaded the galaxy from the galactic northeast, through the region of the Ghoul Stars, and close to the path of Hive Fleet Moloch in the year 997 of the 41st millennium. In the year 998 of the 41st millennium, Hive Fleet Medusa, mistakenly thought by the Imperium to be another tendril of Hive Fleet Leviathan, invaded the isolated ice world of Shadrach. The Space Marines of the Space Wolves chapter fought side by side with the battered survivors of the 10th Slovak Imperial Guard garrison, enacting a heavy toll in alien dead before they were forced to flee the planet. Hive Fleet Pythos, the Red Talons. Chapter held the fortress world of Orask on the edge of the Ghoul Stars from an invading splinter of Hive Fleet Pythos. Hive Fleet Moloch. Hive Fleet Moloch was a minor Hive fleet that plunged through the Ghoul Stars into the galactic north of the known galaxy in the year 998 of the 41st millennium. A vanguard tendril first threatened the agri-world of Jolof in the year 932 of the 41st millennium, just as Technomegas Stanum Vir discovered fragments of a lost standard template construct, STC, data core on the planet. The world's spaceport was defended by Imperial Guard regiments comprised of Agathon, Katashan jungle fighters, Kanak, Molof, and Mordian Iron Guard regiments, selling themselves dearly, which bought enough time for the Adeptus Mechanicus to flee with their precious STC discovery. Much later, the 9th Vostroyan Firstborn Regiment, the Old Irascibles, met their ultimate fate during the fall of Karak Prime in the year 998 of the 41st millennium at the hand of Moloch. They held the main Hive city for 18 solar months against the brutal onslaught of a splinter fleet of Hive Fleet Moloch, valiantly facing a Tyranid swarm that stretched from the base of the city's walls to the distant horizon. With the onset of midwinter, and with the rapid depletion of ammunition and supplies, the 9th Vostroyan knew that they were doomed and vowed to sell their lives dearly. Only when the bulk of the Tyranid swarm had passed into the city did the regiment detonate its nucleonic stack, incinerating the Hive city, its defenders, and an estimated 85% of the Tyranid swarm. With the coming of midwinter, the few surviving Tyranid organisms eventually starved to death, and the splinter fleet was entirely defeated. Hive Fleet Ophidia, first encountered in the year 998 of the 41st millennium, Hive Fleet Ophidia has apparently been mostly destroyed, though splinter fleets and remnants still remain active in the southern regions of the Ultima Segmentum. Hive Fleet Hydra. This dormant Hive fleet was recently discovered in the year 999 of the 41st millennium by the Drukhari of the poisoned Fang Cabal on the very extremes of the galaxy's eastern spiral arm. Instead of destroying the vulnerable Hive fleet, the Drukhari boarded the largest Hive vessels, intent on bringing new specimens back to their cabal's homunculi. However, the Drukhari were unprepared for the rate at which the bioships awoke from their eons-long hibernation, and every Eldari pirate that set foot inside one of the living ships was slain, butchered by a frenzied tide of Tyranids spawned to protect the living vessel. The remaining Drukhari fleet attempted to escape, but for every drone ship they destroyed, two more took its place. Prematurely awakened from its slumber, Hive Fleet Hydra accelerated its advance into the galaxy to slake its hunger. Hive Fleet Charybdis and Hive Fleet Scylla. Hive Fleets Charybdis and Scylla are separate Hive fleets that are both carving parallel paths through the Segmentum Pacificus, the closest known Tyranid threat to Terra. Additionally, unless the Saimhan craft world alters its course, it will fall into the clutches of the twin Hive fleets. Hive Fleet Eumenides. Sometime during the late 41st millennium, this Tyranid Hive fleet battled against hunter cadres of the Tau Empire, led by Commander Shadowsun. Then, in the year 990 of the 41st millennium, the planet Kitab in the Kepler system came under attack by a splinter of Hive Fleet Eumenides. The Raven's Watch chapter was the first to respond to the distress calls with the Storm Talon, the Talon of Johannes, the first craft to breach the planet's atmosphere. Having deployed the ironclad dreadnought brother Chrysica, the Storm Talon streaked across the desert sands towards the invasion fleet's primary synapse node. The craft's pilot was able to deploy Terminator Squad Foran and destroy the node before being forced to leave combat airspace by flocks of ravening harpies and clusters of mucolid spores. Hive Fleet Chimera, one of many new Hive fleets that currently assails the known galaxy. Like numerous other Tyranid fleets, Hive Fleet Chimera was first thought to be a splintered tendril of Hive Fleet Behemoth and not a separate Hive fleet in its own right. Hive Fleet Grendel, one of many new Hive fleets that have recently emerged from their cold sleep through the intergalactic void, Hive Fleet Grendel currently assails the known galaxy. Hive Fleet Harbinger. The Harbinger is a recently discovered Hive fleet that currently assaults the territory of the Imperium. A splinter fleet of Hive Fleet Harbinger recently consumed the Imperial Forge world of Archetri. Hive Fleet Proteus. Hive Fleet Proteus is a Tyranid splinter fleet discovered in the Segmentum Tempestus by the Imperial Fists chapter. Proteus was making its way down the galactic plane towards Terra by way of the Inwit cluster. Splinter fleets. The scattered remnants of the great attack by Hive Fleet Kraken on Ika 4 during the Second Tyrannic War fled towards the galactic core, eventually driving within the Imperial defensive perimeters that had been erected to contain the Kraken. These so-called splinter fleets have, if anything, become an even greater threat as they feed upon unsuspecting and ill-defended worlds far from the major war zones. Running battles with the splinter fleets have continued for many standard years since Hive Fleet Kraken's passage, draining the galaxy's defenses against later incursions. It is doubtful if the true extent of the devastation caused by the Hive Fleet will ever be known. Splinter fleets of the larger Tyranid Hive fleets can comprise as few as a dozen Hive ships, but even a dozen bioships are more than capable of overrunning a world and harvesting its biomass to become a yet greater threat. Some have become so large as to be classified as a new distinct Hive fleet. Indeed, Hive Fleet Megalodon grew from one of Kraken's sundered tendrils and continues to ravage the Imperium to this day. There is no doubt that by this point the Tyranid hive mind has learned a great deal about the galaxy's defenses from the actions of these splinter fleets. Every battle that a group of Tyrannids engages in, whether they are victorious or not, only adds to the hive mind's growing depth of knowledge about its prey within the Milky Way galaxy. Some imperial scholars of a particularly melancholic turn of mind believe that gaining this information was the true goal of Hive Fleet Kraken's invasion. It is perhaps preferable to believe that the hive mind has planned this outcome in advance, than to believe that it has the strategic skill to turn even its greatest defeats into longer-term victories. Hive Fleet Biomorphs. While completely organic in nature like all Tyranid biomechanical technologies, void ship analog Tyranid bioforms have evolved multiple weapon biomorphs that are quite comparable in effectiveness to contemporary Imperial void ship weaponry. Pyroacid cannons. A pyroacid cannon is a common biomorph weapon found on many Tyranid vessels that is comparable to a macrocannon. A pyroacid cannon fires concentrated balls of acid. While the range of these weapons is somewhat limited, their damage and firing rate is considerable, and they have been responsible for outbreaks of fire in the sections of target ships on occasion. Acid spray cannon. An acid spray cannon is a rarer biomorph found on some of the Tyranid command vessels. Instead of a ballistic projectile composed of pyroacid, the vessel sprays a torrent of pyroacid in front of it in a short-range cone for a few solar seconds. While this drool cannon does not have the kinetic punch of the pyroacid cannon in terms of instantly damaging an enemy ship and cannot be fired as frequently as one, it is more flammable. Ships caught in the spray often immediately catch fire on multiple decks. Bioplasma cannons. The bioplasma cannon is another common weapon biomorph found on many Tyranid vessels that is comparable to a lance. This weapon fires a rapid stream of biochemically created, superheated plasma at the target. It possesses a shorter range, a slower firing rate, and lower damage output than a pyroacid cannon. However, bioplasma cannons are almost perfectly accurate, and their plasma is fairly effective at punching through hull armor. The plasma can pass completely through void shields by an unknown method, nebula and asteroid mass consumption. Some Tyranid fleets have been seen using asteroid belts and nebulas comprised of interstellar gas and dust to fuel their metabolisms. While inside such a nebula or asteroid field, the Tyranids have been observed firing their weapons at roughly double the normal rate, making it exceptionally dangerous for Imperial fleets to engage them in such environments. Spore shields. Spore shields are a biomorph that essentially serves as a defensive void shield for Tyranid void ships. Tyranid ships do not use an energy-based defensive field akin to void shields or the Craftworld Eldari's holofield technology. However, larger Tyranid vessels have been seen using a biological equivalent that is comprised of a dense cloud of spores emitted from and surrounding the vessel, acting as a living secondary shell of armor. These spores are also capable of attack. Enemy ships that get into close range to a Tyranid bioship with an active spore shield will take damage as the spores slowly start eating its outer hull. The spores will also actively fire themselves at incoming torpedoes and fighters in a manner similar to that of point defense turrets on Imperial void ships. Like void shields, this protective layer can be overwhelmed by sustained fire, which then allows strikes on the hull of the Tyranid bioship. Like void shields, spore shields will eventually regenerate and reform once they are no longer being overwhelmed by enemy fire. Tentacles. Tentacles are a melee-based biomorph sometimes found on Tyranid bioships. Several Tyranid bioship variants have multiple types of tentacles instead of weapons attached to the bow or mouth of the bioship. These tentacles are used to latch on and pull a target vessel closer to the Tyranid bioship, physically striking a ship to knock it further away, or latching onto a ship to act as a boarding tunnel for lictor squads that can proceed to infiltrate the vessel and initiate a ship-to-ship boarding action. Devourer claws. Devourer claws are a biomorph that serve as a potent close combat weapon for Tyranid bioships. Several Tyranid bioship variants have been seen with no standard weapon biomorphs deployed on the bow of the bioship. Instead, they have an extremely large mouth accompanied by hardened claw appendages. These bioship variants demonstrate the fundamental goal of the Tyranids in void warfare quite clearly. They rapidly close with an enemy void ship and collide with it, their devourer claws latching onto the ship and consuming it over time. Rapid regeneration. Tyranid bioships have been seen to have exceptional regenerative abilities both in and out of combat. Every Tyranid bioship that can be classified as a capital ship analogue has been found to have onboard crew hatcheries. Tyranid bioships do need an onboard crew just like those of other starfaring species. However, when a Tyranid vessel sustains crew losses, they can grow and hatch new crew members almost instantly as the need arises, including even during combat. Tyranid fleets have also been seen constructing hatchery-like structures in space in sectors they control. These hatcheries appear to be repositories of spare biomass and regenerative enzymes. Outside of combat, sizable Tyranid fleets use these void structures to rapidly regenerate critical damage to their bioships and fully restore their onboard crews of various bioforms. Synaptic link. Tyranid Hive fleets have been seen to have a distinctive command and control structure. Each Hive fleet centers around a command vessel, which acts as a synaptic link for the bioships of the fleet with the rest of the Hive mind. When such a command ship is destroyed, if there are no similar synaptic link bioships nearby to maintain psychic command and control, the subordinate bioships of a Hive fleet will turn uncontrollably feral and rapidly become completely disorganized, making them easy targets for enemy void ships to pick off. However, as long as these synaptic command ships remain intact, their subordinate vessels remain under the Hive mind's perfect control. They have never been seen breaking or fleeing from their command vessel during combat. Such synaptic command ships are powerful psychic entities. Some have been known to emit a psychic scream. This is a shockwave of psychic energy that can shatter the minds of enemy crews, making them flee the battle in fear. Hive ships have also been known to emit similar, albeit weaker, screams, akin to a death shriek upon their demise. The end of one battle is merely the beginning of another, as the Tyranids continue to consume the galaxy. What will be the outcome of this war?